Yo, what's good, people? Dave Loughran along with Matt Gajewski talking rookie running backs today. Why, you may ask? Because people have lost their ever-living minds when it comes to rookie running backs this year. I'm not saying they're going to be bad, not all of them, of course, but my God, some of the ADP, some of the hype swirling around these guys, especially as we work our way into the second week of training camp, is through the roof. And we're here to talk about whether or not you should be hyped on these guys, or maybe, just maybe, you should pump the brakes a little bit. Matt, what's going on, brother?
How you doing, Laffy? Normally, I'm a person who's really excited for rookie running backs, and I think we just had a weaker class overall, and then some of our favorite players ending up in some weird situations. So I think my sentiments kind of mirror yours.
This isn't to say that there aren't some rookie running backs that you and I both like. I think it's also, too, the fact that you have to consider where they're being drafted. You might like someone and think that they are long for this league and that they're going to have a very successful career at the NFL level, but also consider the fact that there are some murky scenarios, some totally speculative spots when you're looking at what their role in the backfield is going to be in their rookie season. I have one question for you, though, before we go over our list. We've got, I believe it's 5 rookie running backs here to hit on. Are we going to start seeing more of are we going to start seeing the gap close a little bit when it comes to rookie running backs and rookie receivers, especially with the league trending even more pass heavy? What I mean by that is generally it's always, you draft a rookie running backs early. They have a higher hit rate, even though many of them disappoint. I could run through a list of them over the past couple of years. David Montgomery, 3rd round. Rashad Penny was being drafted in the 3rd round. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the RB19 last year, even though we like him a lot. He even worked his way up into the early 2nd, late 1st. And that's just from the past couple of seasons. There's a lot more that I could get into, but we don't have the time. But when you look at the wide receiver position, last year, you had Justin Jefferson, you had Chase Claypool, you had T. Higgins, who, if Joe Burrow didn't get hurt, probably would have been even more impressive than he was. The list goes on. Those aren't the only guys. CeeDee Lamb, another one, especially if Dak Prescott was healthy. And now you look at it, and you've got guys like Jamar Chase being drafted in the 4th, 5th round. You have Devonta Smith being drafted in the 6th round. A lot of rookie wide receivers now are starting to get this hype that they might not have had in previous years. Does that speak more to the draft class, or does that speak more to what we're seeing, the evolution of the NFL going for more rookie wide receivers jumping straight into the game?
I do think it's a little bit of a change. Prior, we used to see wide receivers take a little bit of time to develop. There was a narrative about the 3rd-year leap for wide receivers, but more and more, they're getting more opportunity earlier in their careers. And even some wide receivers that didn't produce those elite Justin Jefferson level seasons had some pretty good opportunity last year, like a Rager and a Laviska Shenault. They were in some disappointing offenses, but they were still on the field for a lot. I think the running back position is always going to be elevated above wide receivers just because it's a more scarce position. So you're really trying to find those Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry level bell cow backs, and they're hard to find, but people are always going to chase running back for that reason.
Let's talk running backs. The first one on the list, Najee Harris. The guy is a very exciting back. And as someone that is, as astute when it comes to college football as you are, you can expand on this a little bit. But we all know that volume is king when it comes to fantasy football, when it comes to DFS, when it comes to fantasy basketball, like volume is king. Outside of baseball, most sports require volume, and the skill is obviously helpful, and the volume comes because you have skill. But Najee Harris, a 1st-round running back. Last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers struggled mightily, arguably the worst run blocking line in the league. And now you bring in a guy that could easily be a 300-plus touch player, as Mike Tomlin looks to avoid giving 41, 45 attempts per game to Ben Roethlisberger. At his ADP, though, 2nd round, you could grab him early, mid, late. I've seen him go everywhere in the 2nd round. How high are we on Najee Harris going as the number 1 rookie running back off the board for 2021?
I think he's clearly the number 1 rookie because of that volume. He should slide in immediately and handle 3-down work. He was a good pass catcher at Alabama, and he even functioned out of the backfield a little bit in the slot on occasion for them. But at the same time, we have a Pittsburgh team that's trying to commit to the run. They replaced essentially their entire offensive line, which you mentioned how bad they were last year. I think there's a reasonable expectation that they could be a little bit worse this year. So I really think you're looking at sort of a James Robinson level season where it's probably not the most efficient, but it's going to be the volume that gets it done. So in the second round, when you're looking at some other options, I would rather take some of the elite wide receivers. But as far as his status among the fellow rookie running backs, I think he's pretty clearly the number one in this class.
I think so too. And the one thing that I do feel relatively confident about is usually first round rookies drafted in the first round of the actual NFL draft are productive, especially when you've got something. And I'll probably, it sounds counterintuitive or really just hypocritical because of what I'm about to say about Travis Etienne in a few minutes. But in a case like this, you have no more James Conner, and you have a team that I think once they get to the goal line, Najee Harris will still get a lot of work. And that's the one silver lining for me, Matt. Am I a huge believer in Ben Roethlisberger in his 28th year? No. Do I think it's odd that every single skill player for Pittsburgh is being drafted in the top 7 rounds, and Ben Roethlisberger is the QB 28 in spots? Yeah, I think that's a little bit strange. Maybe a bit of a disconnect there. But I still think that they'll be able to move the football enough, even if it is with the passing game shouldering a decent amount of that load, that Najee Harris gets more goal line opportunities than a lot of these other rookie running backs. A lot of other rookie running backs, forget about rookies, just in the league this year, which might be the silver lining because as much as volume is king, so are those goal line touches.
I agree with you, and I think he'll have a good floor as a pass catcher. We've seen Ben Roethlisberger target running backs at an extremely high rate, and this goes all the way back to the Le'Veon Bell days. But even James Conner, he's had at least 34 receptions in each of his 3 seasons with the Steelers, at least where he was functioning as a starter. And much of that, he was injured throughout those seasons. So you're looking at a pretty decent reception floor as long as Najee Harris is healthy. So I think maybe there isn't the highest ceiling, but that reception floor makes him a worthwhile pick where he's going in the second round.
And the running back position falls off so quickly after probably the 3rd round. And you're beginning to see a lot of these running backs that you and I have been talking about a lot. That, you know, you and I discussed our rankings before starting the show, and we're both like, yeah, we have Sanders higher than most. We have Carson higher than most. We have Montgomery higher than most, because once you get past those quote unquote bell cow running backs, it falls off a cliff. And then you're into guys that you don't necessarily know what their workload is going to look like. And Travis Etienne is one of those guys where his ADP, I should say, is all over the map. On Underdog, where they're all paid leagues, you have a lot of sharp drafters over there. Etienne is going inside the top 60. He's a 5th round pick. If you were to look at some of these other leagues, it's a little bit different. Let's say NFL has got him at 52, Yahoo 65, CBS is at 43. So given the murky situation in Jacksonville this season, under Urban Meyer, you still have James Robinson, brought in Carlos Hyde. Where do you stand on Travis Etienne at a 5th round or even higher ADP, depending on where you're drafting?
He's not my favorite player in this range, and I just don't see there being a lot of upside for volume. And you talked about volume with Harris. You talked about volume as far as basically all positions in the NFL go. That's what's going to get the job done for fantasy. And Travis Etienne doesn't look like he's going to see it. Early preseason reports have been glowing about Etienne, but they also come with a caveat that he's being used primarily as a pass catcher. Right. There have also been reports that James Robinson and Carlos Hyde are still working with the first team on early downs, and they're using Etienne mainly as a receiver. And that's great for Etienne. Love to see him used as a receiver, but he's not going to come with the same floor as those other backs.
I recently did a video on this where it was round by round busts. You can check that out. Maybe we can throw a card right up here in the editing process. But the thing that worries me is coach speak doesn't always mean anything. If a guy just shows out at training camp, everything a coach said in April doesn't mean much at all, right? Because just same thing with Matt Nagy and Kyle Shanahan. If Justin Fields or Trey Lance are so good that you're just forced into a situation, it happens. But Urban Meyer basically alluded to the fact that Robinson and Hyde are going to be his downhill backs. They're going to be his early down backs, and then compared Etienne to Percy Harvin and Paris Campbell and Curtis Samuel. So right now, yeah, he's been unguardable from the reports I've seen in camp, but that's, like you said, lined up as a receiver. So are we getting an Etienne that's mostly functioning as a receiver? Are we getting a Travis Etienne who's functioning as a receiver, still competing for targets with Marvin Jones, DJ Chark, and 2nd round Laviska Shenault, who also we have high hopes for? Or is he someone that's also getting some 3rd down work? And then the third thing is he getting carries, Matt? Is he getting 5-6 carries a game? Is he getting a bunch of third down work and lining up as an outside or as a receiver and they want to keep him on the field as much as they can. All of that's possible. I just have no way to put my finger on the pulse of this Jacksonville offense right now. And maybe we'll be enlightened a little bit as training camp goes on. But for now, 5th round to me seems really high.
I agree. And if he is being used as a receiver, that's a big learning curve for him. It's a position he's never played before. They talk about his pass catching prowess at Clemson. That's something he developed in the latter part of his career, and it was entirely out of the backfield. So I still think there's a lot of uncertainty even in that role.
If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We've been crushing lately on the subscriber count. Thanks to you guys. You make all of this possible for watching and supporting the shows and all the free content we're putting out. So hit that thumbs up, subscribe right here. And of course, check out our Awesemo odds channel and our main, if you play DFS, our main DFS channel, that one's got like 60K subs, and we've been branching out into some other spaces lately. So appreciate all of the support for sure. And while you're at it, follow Matt on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski, myself at Loughran_D, LOUGHY_D. All right. Javonte Williams. I'm seeing reports in camp that Javonte Williams is being, or Melvin Gordon is getting the work with the first team. My question to you really is straightforward. How much of us assuming that Javonte Williams will ultimately take over as the lead back this year, kind of like a J.K. Dobbins ahead of Mark Ingram role last year, who was slowly phased out of the offense? How much of that is overblown, and how much of it is legitimate to think that Williams as a day 2 pick, an early day 2 pick, is going to be that guy this year?
I think we see that a lot with backs coming out, at least recently. You mentioned J.K. Dobbins. There's a few other examples, like a DeAndre Swift is someone else who fits that bill, where we have highly drafted running backs, like even going back multiple years. A Joe Mixon is somebody who's finally just getting the backfield to himself. These coaches like to use committees and use their veterans because they know the playbook and they know how to handle themselves in the offense. I've seen the same reports that you have, that Gordon's getting a majority of the first team work, but yesterday it looked like Javonte Williams was mixing in a little bit more. I think it's just going to be a slower ascent for Williams. For fantasy football, maybe he's somebody you want to draft in the mid rounds because he has that upside to get it done for you later in the year. But I think he's somebody that could slowly work into that workload rather than see it to begin with.
What do you see of his ability as a pass catching back, as someone that can shoulder a 3-down workload as a rookie, or going forward?
I think he has excellent pass catching ability. His stats from college are all depressed because he shared a backfield with Michael Carter, but he had 25 receptions last year in college, 305 yards as a receiver. He's fantastic out of the backfield.
Javonte Williams has a 65 ADP right now on Underdog. That's about 6 spots behind Travis Etienne. If you're sitting at the 59 spot and Etienne, which is where his ADP is, and Javonte Williams are both on the board, do you grab one of them or do you look elsewhere?
I'm honestly probably going to try to grab a receiver with some higher upside in that range. Just for reference, you can get some receivers that are still pretty good around there. Someone like an Odell Beckham's coming off the board with an ADP right around 55. He's somebody I like for a bounce back. You have receivers like Kenny Golladay. I know he suffered the injury, but assuming he's fine, he's in that range. One of the 49ers receivers. There's just a lot of upside for pass catchers there, which is where I'm trying to look rather than taking on that uncertainty with running back.
What if Claypool or Mike Davis are still there, same range?
I prefer Mike Davis over the two you mentioned, the two backs. Too. Claypool, I would rather take like an Odell Beckham. If Beckham's off the board and I'm debating between like a Javonte Williams and a Claypool, I would probably go for the upside with Williams.
I think the argument with Mike Davis versus Etienne and Javonte Williams is less based on skill set, because ultimately I anticipate those guys having a better career at the NFL level, and more based solely on pretty much guaranteed volume, Matt, because I don't see anyone behind him in Atlanta right now that should be siphoning off work or vulturing goal line touches.
I agree completely. And you're starting to see some of these veterans getting signed, like Devontae Freeman's not available anymore. The Falcons are running out of options to potentially sign veterans. So I think that just lends itself to Davis seeing more of that work.
All right. So next up on the list with an ADP coming in, you did a video on him. It was a great video, really laying out everything about this backfield. An ADP of 76 on Underdog is Trey Sermon. This backfield is so intriguing to me. And you made a great point when we spoke maybe 3 weeks ago that everybody is hyped on Trey Sermon, and I don't think that's wrong. But everyone's also totally ignoring the other running back in this backfield, Raheem Mostert. And it's possible, as you pointed out, that both of these guys could see like 15 touches per game if this offensive line and this team stays healthy enough to control the pace as they've done in previous seasons. Most memorably, that Super Bowl run from a couple years back.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're starting to see the ADPs diverge between Sermon and Mostert. Early in the offseason, they were like neck and neck, basically the same ADP. But now Sermon is moving ahead, which I think is probably incorrect because we have a larger sample on Mostert. And we know Mostert's going to be the smaller back. He's never going to be your 20, 25 touch running back per game without injury. And for that reason, people are artificially assuming Trey Sermon can play that role when we've seen what the 49ers want to do. They want to use multiple backs. They want to run the ball a lot. The main concern I have with the backfield right now is the emergence of Trey Lance. You know, we have Kyle Shanahan coming out and saying Trey Lance isn't going to see any first team reps. Immediately the next day, Trey Lance is taking first team reps. We have beat writers talking about how much they're using him as a designed runner. Is this a Cam Newton situation in San Francisco potentially?
I want to say no. And you're saying in terms of Newton just vulturing everything?
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be a lot, but we saw Newton come in, take touchdowns, take a handful of carries. Maybe that's what keeps this running backfield from seeing those 15 touches a game apiece. And maybe it's closer to 10 because you have someone like Trey Lance who's also running.
It's definitely possible. I brought this concern up as well. I mean, if it's Garoppolo, you really like them a lot more. There's no doubt about that, hands down. I'm sure Garoppolo will run here and there, but this guy is not your prototypical mobile quarterback like a Trey Lance is, who just can run wild. But I do still think that you could also make an argument for this. If there's still a run-heavy team, it's not crazy to think that Trey Lance as a threat out of the backfield will open up more lanes and make it more efficient on the touches that these guys do get. And we've seen that happen. Like J.K. Dobbins, what did he average? 6 yards per attempt last year. Gus Edwards has averaged over 5 yards per attempt in Baltimore as well. I do think when you have a really good mobile quarterback who's a threat to run on every down, it might open things up a little more, and maybe that'll mitigate a small decline in opportunity for the running backs.
I agree with you there. And I think ultimately, like you mentioned at the top, this comes down to where these players are being drafted. Right now, you're getting Sermon and Mostert outside the top 75 picks. And when you can get an attachment to an explosive offense like San Francisco for that cost, I think you just want to take shots. So if you can get Sermon, you can get Mostert. I'm interested in both.
Yeah, for sure. And Mostert's going in the 8th round right now. The guy, when healthy, has been wildly efficient. And I anticipate both of these guys having value for sure. I'll say this much. If it came down to going, say, you needed a running back, if it's like, okay, maybe I could go Etienne at 59 at 59, or I could wait and grab a Sermon or a Raheem Mostert and get some other wide receivers in the middle rounds. Maybe you go with like a TJ Hawkinson, or if there's a decent tight end there. I'm okay with that process. What about you?
I'm okay with that too. It's all going to depend on what's there, and tight end's a weaker position. So if you can get somebody that's an actual difference maker in that range, that's always going to be where I prefer.
Let's close it out with the last one here. Same college team as Javonte Williams. We're talking about Michael Carter. Now, Michael Carter is in the Jets backfield. You've got Robert Saleh, who came over from San Francisco. You have Mike LaFleur, who came over from San Francisco, also the offense coordinator now. And you have Tevin Coleman, who joined them, came over with them. As it stands now, from what you've seen at camp and from where Michael Carter is being drafted, currently an ADP of 88 on Underdog. So I'm going by ADP here. Michael Carter is the last of the relevant rookies to be drafted in these in drafts. Are we happy getting a Michael Carter here, maybe as our RB3 at the 88 spot for his rookie year?
I think you are. And people have a negative connotation surrounding this Jets offense, and they should. They were one of the worst teams in the NFL last year. That's why they were drafting number 2 overall. But you look at the improvements they've made to their team. They bolstered the offensive line, back-to-back first-round picks in subsequent years. Zach Wilson, they have Elijah Moore, who's now running with the first team. They invest in other receivers, Keelan Cole, Corey Davis. So we're expecting a step forward from the offense, and maybe they don't even get to 500, but that step forward should mean more opportunities along the goal line, more pass catching opportunities for the running backs. And we have Michael Carter now running with the first team. He is splitting reps with Tevin Coleman, and he probably will throughout his career. Michael Carter's just north of 200 pounds. He's about the same size as Giovanni Bernard, and those running backs typically don't handle a full workload. But if we get even 60, 70% of the backfield, that's valuable where Michael Carter's coming off the board.
Interesting. It's also interesting that Tevin Coleman, in the years where he's actually been heavily involved, he has not been that bad. I mean, he has what? He had 11 touchdowns in 2016. He had 8 in 2017. He had 9 in 2018, and then 7 in 2019. Over the course of those seasons, he had 3+ receiving touchdowns in all but 1 year. I'm not saying Tevin Coleman is the second coming of Barry Sanders. We all know that. What I am saying is that Tevin Coleman isn't terrible to the point where he's not going to get any opportunities. So I do think that's worth considering. But if you're getting Michael Carter there, you know, in the 8th round, later 8th round, I feel decent about that. And I think all of your points are relevant here. But even though this is a rookie running back conversation that we're having, what are your thoughts on Tevin Coleman with an ADP of 181, going almost 100 picks after Michael Carter on the same team? And as you pointed out, probably splitting reps.
I love him there. I think he's one of the best value picks you can get in fantasy. I think his floor is like 30 to 40% of the running back work. And he's
the RB 53 right now, which seems nuts. He's going behind Giovanni Bernard.
Yeah, who's splitting time with 2 other backs and likely is limited to just third down snaps.
Yeah.
Like Tevin Coleman could have a role on all 3 downs. It could be a 50-50 timeshare in an offense we're expecting to take a step forward.
Of all of these rookies at all of their ADPs, who do you love the most and who do you hate the most? Hate's a strong word, but yeah.
Hate's a strong word. The one I'll say dislike the most, it's going to be Etienne, just because I don't see much of a ceiling in the role we're expecting for him this year. I think the player who has the chance to outperform their ADP the most is Michael Carter. It's more dependent on where he's going in drafts, and I do think he'll have a role. Like Najee Harris, I expect to have the better season, but he's being drafted as a running back who's going to have a 3-down role. Michael Carter, with his ADP in the 80s, there's a chance that he outperforms that.
And who do you think the safest is?
I think it's Najee, but again, you're investing in that.
Just straight volume based for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
After that, I might be tempted to say Trey Sermon if Jimmy Garoppolo is starting, but we still have some uncertainty there. Anyway, that'll do it for us. Hit Matt up at Matt_Gajewski, myself at Laffy_D. Check out all the other awesome videos we got here right on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. You don't need to go anywhere else to get ready for your drafts. I can promise you that. From every topic you can think of, it's right here on the channel. Hit that thumbs up if you enjoy this video, subscribe, and we'll catch you back here for the next one. Peace.